The greatness of a nation cannot be measured simply by the percentage of the globe its territory occupies, or by its gross national product. True greatness can be found in the strength and character of its people, and since the birth of this republic, we as a people have chosen to recognize those among us who, despite hardship, have performed their duty above and beyond expectation. Across the United States, in town squares, on public buildings, and in peaceful cemeteries, monuments stand to these individuals. More than mere decorations, these memorials serve as an inspiration to us all. They represent dedication to a cause and commitment to the preservation of our ideals of liberty, and illustrate all too well that our freedom has been purchased with patriot blood. However, there are monuments that, while just as inspiring, are not made of marble and bronze, but rather of faded ink and brittle paper. In the archives of the U.S. Army Chemical School and U.S. Army Chemical Museum, we have documents and photographs relating to the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion and its service in World War II and Korea. First Lieutenant Dave Goodell of Alpha Company commented on the unique history of the 2nd Chemical Battalion. The Red Dragons of the 2nd Battalion are the direct descendants of the 1st Gas and Flame Regiment, who did so much good in the Great War. But we had a weapon they didn't, the 4.2-inch chemical mortar. We were the first mortar battalion to prove what they could do. There was no book, no experience. The weapon had never been used in combat before. Nobody really knew how well it would perform or how best to use it. On 16 April 1935, the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion was activated at Edgewood Arsenal, Maryland, as the 2nd Chemical Battalion Motorized. It consisted at that time of a headquarters and headquarters company and Alpha Company. In 1942, after moving to Fort Bragg, the battalion's Bravo, Charlie, and Delta companies were activated along with the medical detachment. Following activation, the battalion went through several weeks of rigorous training at Fort Bragg, then later practiced firing their 4.2-inch mortars from landing crafts in Camp Carabel, Florida. While conducting training, rumors of an overseas deployment began to circulate. The 2nd Chemical Battalion arrived on the beaches of Sicily a year later on 10 July 1943 with the 45th Infantry Division. The battalion used carts to transport their mortars, though keeping up with the infantry was no easy task. The infantry traveled lightly and quick over the mountainous roads of Sicily. Back in training stateside, the infantry laughed at us as we pulled our 2-wheeled mortar carts. They made hee-haw noises and cracked jokes about jackasses pulling carts. Nobody hee-haws now. We pass infantry platoons that have fallen out beside the roads, and the guys will get up from where they're laying to help us move our carts over rough spots. They say, we want those big guns up where we need them. And we are there, ready to deliver fire when they need us. Even during the times when the 2nd Chemical Battalion was constantly on the move, the soldiers managed to find some time to sit down and cook up some food. Although it was nothing like what Mom used to make, it still managed to do the job of getting something warm in their stomachs. The soldiers of the 2nd Chemical Battalion used wooden boxes from mortar rounds to make fires to cook their food. With all those rounds being fired, it was never too hard to find a wooden box to cut up for the cooking fire. During the attack on San Pietro, Italy on 15 December 1943, the 2nd Chemical Battalion's mortars were utilized to support the 142nd Infantry Regiment by providing a smokescreen in preparation for the attack. While the initial attack on San Pietro was unsuccessful, the following night attack on Mount Lungo was a great success. The attack on Mount Lungo secured a piece of key terrain and made it possible for the attack on San Pietro the next day to succeed. In early May 1944, the battalion moved into positions close to Minturno, Italy, with the 85th and 88th Infantry Divisions, and began hauling ammunition for the large attack that was planned. To accomplish this task, Italian pack mule companies were made available, and special pack harnesses were improvised to carry the 4.2-inch mortars. When the attack finally began near Minturno on 11 May 1944, it was touch and go for the infantry, and for the mortars, it was constant firing. In the initial preparation, the unit fired 1,267 rounds in the first 15 minutes. 5,293 rounds were expended in the first 24 hours of the attack, approximately 1/4 of which was white phosphorus. The 2nd Chemical Battalion performed brilliantly, Their high explosive rounds paved the way for the infantry's success, and white phosphorus rounds screened every movement made by the infantry. In late May 1944, the 2nd Chemical Battalion was once again attached to the 85th Infantry Division and moved into positions to support an attack on Rome. On 4 June, Rome fell without a fight, and thus ended the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion's part in the Italian campaign. Victory had been achieved after overcoming many major difficulties and surviving untold hardship and danger. General Clark, 5th Army Commanding General, was quoted as saying he would never commit an infantry division without an attached chemical mortar battalion. The battalion then occupied a rest area just north of Rome, and for the first time in a year, relaxed and rested without the thoughts of things to come. Following the victory in Italy, the 2nd Chemical Battalion arrived in France in August of 1944. Alpha Company occupied 28 gliders for the trip into France as part of the Airborne Task Force for Operation Dragoon. The remaining companies landed on France's beaches relatively unopposed. Upon arrival, Alpha Company assembled their soldiers and equipment, and the unit was ready for their mission to link up and support the assault on Lemieux. Alpha Company accomplished its mission in this operation with great success, and now wears the glider badge as one of its most treasured possessions. Also, it was determined from German documents captured in that sector that the 4.2-inch mortars were given an A1 priority by German artillery as its counter-battery target, further attesting to the accuracy and casualty effects of the 2nd Chemical Battalion. In November 1944, the battalion moved to the vicinity of Courtlevent, France. There they fired the first rounds that would land on German soil. During the night of 29 November, all companies moved into position in Saint Louis, France, and prepared to fire in support of the attack, as well as at targets of opportunity on call from forward observers. The attack was successful largely because of the effect of the mortars. Throughout the rest of World War II, the 2nd Chemical Battalion would participate in the defense of the Saar River line and then move on to help with the breaching of the Maginot and Siegfried lines. Finally, they would eventually cross the Rhine River, and at the end of the war, the 2nd Chemical Battalion would find themselves in the vicinity of Salzburg, Austria. It had been 670 days since the 2nd Chemical Battalion landed in Sicily on 10 July 1943. They had spent 511 of those days in actual combat. The 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion was inactivated on 26 July 1946 in Germany. During World War II, 2nd Chemical Battalion soldiers earned 2 Legions of Merit, 17 Silver Stars, 94 Bronze Stars, and 248 Purple Hearts. On 1 February 1949, the 2nd Chemical Battalion was activated again at the Army Chemical Center in Maryland, formerly known as Edgewood Arsenal. The 2nd Chemical Battalion was completing annual reserve and National Guard training requirements when North Korea attacked South Korea in June of 1950. The 2nd Chemical Battalion arrived at the port of Pusan in South Korea on 8 October 1950, and on 1 May 1951, the battalion's forward position was located in the vicinity of Chuncheon, Korea, and the battalion's rear position located in the vicinity of Incheon, Korea. Beginning 19 May, probing attacks on the defensive line became more frequent and stronger. That night, the battalion fired 2,426 rounds on the enemy, who was attempting to overrun friendly lines. The battalion's fire missions were directed primarily at scattered enemy troops, inflicting numerous casualties on those unprotected enemy personnel, as well as destroying their machine guns and mortars. Those 2nd Chemical Battalion soldiers were effectively repelling the enemy. Their mortars were beginning to show their age, and problems began to arise. The battalion desperately needed the new M30 mortar to maintain their combat effectiveness. A letter to the Chief Chemical Officer was prepared asking for the new mortars, and in July of 1952, the battalion finally received their first 20 M30 mortars. A few months after the arrival of the new M30 mortars, Charlie Company's 2nd Squad of 2nd Platoon had the distinct honor of firing the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion's 100,000th round on 19 September 1951. The squad celebrated this momentous occasion with a few cold ones. Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Moore commented on the valor of 2nd Chemical Battalion, saying, Most of the time, there was an almost constant duel between the weapons on each side, artillery, mortars, and small arms day and night. The pitched battles that occurred were mostly over terrain features that one side or the other wanted to take to improve its position. These were mainly hills that dominated and offered superior observation over the line of contact, and were given such names as the Punch Bowl, Bloody Ridge, Heartbreak Ridge, Pork Chop Hill, and Old Baldy. Many smaller ones were nameless, given only a number. During these battles, some of the most intense, savage, and bitter fighting of the war took place. Throughout the Korean War, the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion conducted themselves with professionalism, honor, and courage. The 2nd Chemical Battalion was the last Chemical Mortar Battalion to be phased into the infantry. They distinguished themselves to such a degree that during just one award ceremony on 7 July 1952, the battalion soldiers were presented with 1 Silver Star and 10 Bronze Stars. This is just one example of the accolades that the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion earned during its time serving in the Korean War. The story of the 2nd Chemical Mortar Battalion is one worth telling, and it's one that demands to be preserved. These Red Dragon soldiers exemplify the proud tradition of the Chemical Corps, and their values of sterling service, selfless sacrifice, and dedication to duty are timeless. By remembering these qualities, we are forced to uphold them, take them as our own, and strive toward excellence. Beginning in 1989, the U.S. Army Chemical Corps has honored those within its own ranks who have performed their duties in an exemplary manner. These individuals have dedicated their lives to the service of our nation through their committed work with the United States Army Chemical Corps. During their years of service, these men and women have upheld the high standards of their predecessors and have mentored and inspired a new generation of soldiers and civil servants who continue to work into the 21st century.